You are listening to the Maple Footy Podcast. This is the unofficial football podcast of the North. I'm your host, Sam Little. Find me at official Sam Little on Instagram. There's nothing left to say except for sit back, enjoy, and welcome to the show.
Hello, yes, welcome back to the Maple Footy Podcast, the unofficial football podcast of the North. And right off the bat, I'm very sorry if my voice sounds a little bit nasally or not great. I do have a cold that I am getting over. And yeah, so I do apologize for that if you kind of hear and go, he sounds a little different this week. That would be why. And right off the bat as well, next week there will be no episode on Tuesday as there is no Premier League action to cover this weekend as it's international break. So I will do my best to cover the Canada game next week against Panama. I do have other things going on next week, so if I don't, I do apologize, as that is something that I do really look forward to and love to do. I will absolutely try my best to do so, but if I can't, I do apologize in advance. But speaking of Canada, it was a big week for Canadian football, I think. So I wanted to take a good chunk of time and kind of talk about some of the big moments this week. First and foremost, probably the biggest, I would say, news of the week for Canadian football would be this guy named Jonathan David. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. Obviously you have. Got a hat trick last weekend, of course. But then midweek, he scores the goal to end Real Madrid's 36 unbeaten run in all competitions. And I believe they were 10 games unbeaten in Champions League. And Jonathan David ended that. So yeah, that's a pretty big thing. And for a Canadian to have done that is very, very impressive. And that's the kind of the stuff that we live for, that we love to see as Canadian football fans. So absolutely hats off to the Iceman. Cold penalty, cold player, big move on the horizon, I'm sure. Kyle Larin, his striking partner at international level, has also enjoyed a good run of form. He's now got a goal and 2 assists in his last 3 games. That's massive, as he was on a little bit of a goal drought. And as I've been pretty vocal about on the Maple Footy podcast, I think that he's done everything right, just not get the ball in the back of the net. So it's good that now he's coming into this international break, hopefully with some confidence, maybe he can score another goal for Canada. Theo Bair has registered his first goal in France for his club Osea. I do apologize if I'm saying that wrong. I've tried to use Google Translate to know how to say the name properly. But Osea, I think, once again, I apologize. His club, Theo Bair's club, they did lose 3-1, but he did get his first goal. I'm a big fan of Theo Bair, just for how hard he's worked off the pitch. I watched an entire video that Motherwell, his club last season, had posted just about how hard he was working behind the scenes to really improve himself as a player. And obviously it paid off last year with Motherwell, as he had his best year professionally and was rewarded with this move to France. And now he's gotten his first goal. Hopefully he can really kick on. I'm a big fan of his, so I'd love to see it. Maybe some minutes, some big minutes, hopefully, against Panama in our international friendly are coming up for him, hopefully. Another first, as Liam Miller also got his first goal for Hull. He has started this season on fire. And yes, the Maple Footy podcast is the home of the Liam Miller hive. So invest in the stocks. He, to me, is one of our most underrated players. I love the way he plays. And his goal is that typical Liam Miller cut in. Of course, his first initial shot is blocked, but still he's got himself in that position. The ball rebounds right to him. He hammers it home, and it's a great finish. It's definitely well earned from him. He's had a great start to the season with Hull. Another first. Junior Hoylett has gotten his first goal for his new club in Scotland. Hibernian, who also sadly did lose that game, but Junior Hoylett scored, so we as Canadians can at least be happy about that. Staying in Scotland with Alistair Johnston, who had a big weekend with a 2-1 win for Celtic. where he got the goal and the assist. So, big weekend for him. Absolutely. I mean, if you watch the goal, I don't think he knows much about it, but they all count, and we will definitely claim them all, especially for our number 2. So, definitely, he's just the best, isn't he? So, just good on him. You love seeing him get a moment like that. So, congrats to Alistair Johnston. Moise Bombito, traveling back to France, had a great game for Nice against PSG, and that is obviously no small feat, as PSG are the kings of France. So for Bombito to be crucial at the back in a 1-1 draw is absolutely immense. We love to see it for our Canadian boys when they're doing well, and he had an immense performance. So good on Bombito, really kind of solidifying himself as a great young center back talent. In Germany, Alphonso Davies played a crucial part in Bayern's 3-3 draw with Frankfurt. He went the full 90 and also had a great performance. I mean, what else would you expect from Fonzie? He's that guy, So, and just kind of more of the same from him. I mean, we'll probably be talking about him a lot when Bayern Munich inevitably win the league again. I know they didn't last year, but do we really think they're going to go 2 in a row? I don't think so. You heard it here first on the Maple Footy podcast. I don't think that they go 2 years in a row without winning the Bundesliga. And in more closer to home, Toronto FC, not going to be involved in the postseason again. I believe this is definitely 3, I think 4 seasons in a row now. Their last playoff was 2020. So a bit heartbreaking for them and the Canadian players, especially guys like Jonathan Osorio and Richie Larea, who really not only this weekend put it all out on the pitch, but all season put it all out on the pitch when they could. So very disappointing for guys like them, but it's indicative of poor management, whether it's backroom or potentially on the pitch, mismanagement of funds, brackets, signing Lorenzo Insigne for $15 million a year, or whatever else. I mean, I have talked about TFC in a little bit more depth over on the podcast I did last week, so go check that out if you haven't. It was the Canadian Championship debrief. So check that out if you haven't. Montreal's playoff hopes are clinging on by a thread at the moment, but we'll have to wait and see. They play their clinching game in the coming days, so we'll have to wait and see if we have another Canadian team in the playoffs, as Vancouver did already clinch. And then some other Canadian representation. Portland Timbers look like they could be clinching their playoff spot. It looks like they are good. Actually, mathematically speaking, I think they are. Looking at the table, yeah, they're 46 up on Austin, who are right behind them. So, yeah, they got 46. Austin's got 39. So I would say Portland has clinched it. So that's Crepeau and Miller. And then where else do we got Canadians? Tani Oluwaseyi and St. Clair look like they've clinched their playoff spots as well with Minnesota, which is massive. Jacob Schaffelberg and Lucas McNaughton look like they're going to be missing out on the playoffs with Nashville, as they are even behind TFC at this moment in time. So, any Canadian team or player that wins the MLS Cup will be happy about it. If there are any, of course, we cross our fingers that there are. And big-time signing for Jesse Costa, who is our U20 captain, has just signed for the Corinthians in Brazil, which is a massive team to sign with in Brazil. So I would say that this is pretty massive news and definitely a player and potential star in the making that we should really be keeping our eyes on. And finally, wrapping up our Canada wrap-up is Forge have officially won the CPL Shield, which means they won the regular season and will be advancing into the playoffs, which they had clinched a few weeks back. But regardless, they will be heading into the playoffs. And this is my time to kind of open this up as maybe a trial run of if you would be interested in hearing me follow and cover the CPL playoffs. It is Canada's Premier League. It's our top quality competition. So I would be definitely down to do it. If you would, definitely comment, DM me on any of my socials. And just saying if you would like to hear that. If you would, if you wouldn't, I'm open to it. I would definitely love to do it, but if there's really no appetite for it, then I'm gonna do it anyways. No, I'm kidding. If like we are vehemently no, then I don't know. I'll probably still find a way to do it. But anyways, moving into what is the namesake of this podcast, the Premier League recap, and you already know the drill. Match of the weekend, biggest winners of the weekend, biggest underperformers of the weekend, best performance, moment of the weekend, relegation zone, European places, title race. Let's get into it. So, match of the weekend, I don't think it's really close. I would say Brentford Wolves 5-3. It was extremely back and forth, which I know you go 5-3. Brentford got 5 past them. No, it was very back and forth. Within the first 28 minutes, it was already 3-2. And, I mean, within the first 4 minutes, it was 1-1. So, yeah, it was in the first 2 minutes, Brentford scored. Then 2 minutes later, Cunha scored. Then the 20th, Mbomo converted a penalty. 6 minutes later, Strad Larson scored for Wolves. And then in the 20th minute, Norgard scored for Brentford. And then right before half, Brentford made it 4-2. And then in the 90th minute, Fabio Carvalho, former Liverpool boy, scored for Brentford. And then in the 93rd minute, Ait Nouri scored for Wolves. So one of those games that was fast and furious. And that's why we love the Prem, because we get those games hopefully more often than not. And I would say this is the match of the weekend. Definitely go back, watch some of the highlights. It's definitely worth it. Some great goals, some great bits of play. Brentford having a great start to the season. And Wolves, this will not be our last time talking about them this episode. But Brentford definitely having a very good start to the season, I would say, as they now sit in, let me check, 11th place on 10 points after 7 games played. Not too shabby, I would say. Moving into biggest winners of the weekend, there's definitely a good few, but starting out with West Ham United, definitely not the ideal start to the season, not the one that I think a lot of people had envisioned for the Hammers, but nonetheless a big win against Ipswich, a 4-1 win. I think it does a lot for their confidence, for their coach as well, as you know, these wins have been very few and far between these first 7 games. So for them to win 4-1 so emphatically over Ipswich, I think that's a pretty big result for them, I would say. And now you're gonna hope, following the international break, that they really build on that. 2 weeks off though isn't ideal, I would say, coming off of like your first real massive win of the season. Then it's 2 weeks off, and then you have to recuperate after an international break, hoping, praying that none of your star players, or any of your players for that matter, get injured. So it's definitely kind of not an ideal time to pick up such a big win. Not that it's bad that they got the win. Just now it's going to be like, okay, you want to build momentum on that, but now it's a 2-week pause. So not ideal in that sense is kind of what I mean. Another big winner of the weekend, I would have to say, is, drumroll, Liverpool. Once again, I mean, they seem to just be grafting out these results and maybe not playing the prettiest at the moment. This is a couple games in a row where they haven't looked phenomenal. They definitely haven't looked bad, but they haven't looked phenomenal. But they grind out, they find an early goal in the 9th minute, and you're thinking, okay, maybe this game's got something to it, but it really doesn't. That's really about the only highlight of the match. That and Alisson and McAllister both went out injured for Liverpool, but that's a bad highlight, not a great highlight. So it's definitely, those were, like I've been harping on about, it's these results where maybe you don't deserve the result, or maybe it was a hard-fought result regardless, but it's those kinds of results that see you lifting the Premier League trophy at the end of the season when you look back on, say, a season retrospective and you go, yeah, no, it was those results that we probably shouldn't have had, that we did get. Those were the difference makers. And I think that's what separates champions from just a good team. Speaking of champions, let's talk about former champions Leicester. Big win for them against Bournemouth, and I can't understate that, as they've had a very rocky start to the season. Disappointing 4-2 loss to Arsenal. And I say disappointing because they were in such a good position for a good portion of that game and then ended up kind of losing it at the end. So they need a big bounce back this week, and they did have that against Bournemouth, who have also another team that's kind of started the season pretty well. But we're talking about Leicester, and it's a big win for them, 1-0 against Bournemouth. Obviously nothing like insane happened in the match, but when they're going to be fighting for their lives this season, it's these games that matter the most. And against Bournemouth, they did what they had to do. Once again, not like a 5-star performance by any stretch of the imagination, but still a big win nonetheless. Moving on to biggest losers. Sorry, underwhelmers. I say losers because they did lose this weekend. And honestly, I just don't really like this team. And you probably know which team it is, as I'm a Chelsea fan and I say I don't like this team. It's Tottenham. It's Tottenham. Biggest ball jobs. Maybe that's what I should title the segment this week. Biggest bottle jobs. Yeah, Tottenham, obviously, because how do you go 2-0 up against Brighton and then within 30 minutes, you're 3-2 down? Like, okay. How does that happen? I'll tell you how it happens when you're Tottenham. No offense to any of my Tottenham fans. I mean, you're probably used to it at this point. But, sorry. But, of course, when you kind of go 2-0 up, anytime you go 2-0 up, you kind of expect to see out, at the very least, a draw, Like, even, say, going 2-0 up and then ending with a 2-2. Definitely not ideal, but at least you still got something from the match. But going 2-0 up and then conceding 3? What? How? There was a video of Ange Postecoglou kind of after the third, I think it was either a second or third goal had went in, and the Brighton crowd was obviously going crazy behind him. And he just looked like a man that was maybe a little bit defeated. I mean, he had big talk coming into this season saying that he always wins silverware in his second season. I don't know what silverware he's going to win, because they're obviously not winning the Prem. Cup competition is probably his best option, like a Carabao Cup or FA Cup. I don't see them winning Europa League. So, I mean, maybe there's still time for him to prove himself, right? But I think he's kind of just dug himself a hole, and I'm not sure he knows how to get out of it, because how do you fix something that Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte couldn't fix? Two serial winners, and Jose Mourinho definitely goes down in GOAT conversations, and Antonio Conte is definitely one of the best managers of this century. So how do you now, they couldn't do it. How do you do it? It's just something that just seems to follow Tottenham at the moment. Well, not the moment, for the last 15 years. They just can't seem to get it done, whether it's in the games or in the hunt for trophies. And you saw it here. It's just, I don't know if it's a mentality thing. It's definitely not a talent thing. They have a talented squad. So I just don't know how do you fix this, Obviously, I think it's funny that it isn't fixed, because it always generates some laughs, and that's always nice, isn't it? Another one of my biggest underwhelmers would be, obviously, the boys in red in Manchester. Yeah, it's United, isn't it? Because 0-0 to Villa obviously is not the worst result in the world. But when you really need to pick up results, they are 14th right now on 8 points after 7 games played. That is the worst. That's the worst start to a season after 7 games, I believe, in Premier League, like in the modern era, for Manchester United. Bettering the record from last season. I guess technically worsening it, because they had more points last year, but that used to be their worst. And now this is now their worst. So, I mean, you can say what you want about Ten Hag, but you can't say he's not a record setter. So it's kind of another one of those things, kind of in the same vein of Tottenham, but obviously different. Of like, how do you fix this? With Tottenham, it's like, how do you fix this? How do we like get out this bottling like DNA of the club? With Manchester United, how do we fix this? Of like, how do we get back on track to being one of the most dominant clubs in England and really in the world at their peak? So it's a very interesting case study, really, of just seeing Ten Hag not knowing really what to do. He's finally been rewarded with players that he's wanted, and most of them were on the bench. He started a center back duo. Sorry, Johnny Evans didn't start. Johnny Evans ended up coming on, and Harry Maguire was on. You have the Leicester back line from like 6 years ago starting for you. It's just not going to work, you know? So he's gotten the investment. I just don't really know what the excuse is. Apologies. Johnny Evans did start. You just don't have the excuses of, well, I'm not getting funding. I'm not this. I'm not that. And anytime he does like a post-match interview, it's always, well, you know, we've been to 2 cup finals. That's phenomenal. You've been to 2 cup finals. But is that really something to hang your hat on to keep your job? Once again, not advocating for anybody losing their job. But when we know that United will pull the trigger if need be, you're hanging your hat on, well, we made it to 2 FA Cup finals. One we won and one we lost. So do with that as you will. I just don't get it. I really don't get it. And I'd be interested to hear what like Manchester United fans are thinking. I mean, I see the Twitter talk and whatnot, but to really sit down and actually have a proper conversation, I'd be very interested to hear what any of them would have to say. But we're going to move away from the biggest underperformers, and we're going to move on to best performance. For, I believe, the second time this season, I'm naming Bukayo Saka as one of the performers of the weekend. 2 assists and a goal as Arsenal edged past Southampton 3-1. Now, we all know I'm not an Arsenal fan, and I don't like to give them any credit or plaudits, but Saka did play a very, very good game on the weekend. I know he's kind of getting I don't know how else to say it, but memed on Twitter. I don't know. I don't like using the word memed to describe something. I don't know how else to say it, though. But essentially getting memed on Twitter because he is always taking corner kicks and is providing assists off of those. Whereas, yeah, I mean, like, you know, it's not the creativity that we'd probably want from a winger. But he had a very good game, like I said, picking up 2 assists and a goal. And he is really developing into, I mean, you could make the case that he has developed already into one of the best wingers in the league. And it's good to see, especially after everything that had happened back in 2021, the Euros. You know, who would have thought that we'd be here now 3 years later talking about him as one of the stars of the Prem. So credit to him for really kind of kicking on after that, and has been crucial and probably one of Arsenal's best players in the last couple seasons. So him now kind of stepping up in these moments. I know, oh, it's only Southampton. You know, I know that there's always going to be that crowd, but for him to step up in these games where his team needs him, and he shows up. He showed up. They were 1-0 down. 3 minutes later, then he provides the assist. 10 minutes after that, provides another assist. 20 minutes after that, gets the goal to really seal the 3 points. It's what you want from your big-time players, and that's exactly what they got from Saka this weekend. Another performance of the weekend, Mateo Kovacic for Manchester City. And I would say it's also a symbolic performance, as he is now going to be stepping in for that Rodri role, I think, a lot this season, barring that Kovacic doesn't get injured, knock on wood. You know, don't want anybody to get injured. But he's going to be seeing a lot more game time now that Rodri is out. So 2 goals from him, where Manchester City, once again, didn't play greatly. I mean, you know, Phil Foden, I don't think was looking great. Bernardo Silva looked pretty good, I would say. Gundogan, Grealish weren't anything special. Haaland lacked any service. They needed someone to step up, is the point I'm trying to make. And Mateo Kovacic does step up, leaves with a brace of all things, because who would have thought that Mateo Kovacic would have gotten would have gotten one goal, never mind two. Guys, I watched him at Chelsea for years. He's not a goal scorer, but he steps up, kind of like Saka when his team needed him. They weren't playing great, looked out of answers, and then he steps up. They leave with 3 points, and when you're in a title race, that's what matters. Going into our moment of the weekend, it's got to be the Brighton comeback, right? Like 2-0 down, you go 3-2 up. I've already kind of talked about this match, so I don't really have much more to say on it. But, 2-0 to 3-2 at home. The fans going ballistic after that third goal from Danny Welbeck, who, by the way, now has more Premier League goals than Eric Cantona, which is kind of an insane stat to think about, isn't it? Cantona finished with 77. Welbeck now has 78. Just food for thought. I don't know. Just wanted to share that. I saw that stat earlier today and just wanted to share it. So I would say that's my moment of the weekend, guys. Nothing really new to add to that game, but apart from that stat for Danny Welbeck. So moving on to the next segment, relegation zone. I knew that off the top of my head. I didn't need to look at my notes. So I will finally say Wolves are looking in trouble. I have been pretty lenient on giving them any kind of criticism. Not that I haven't criticized them, but kind of just saying they'll get out of this. And I still do think they will. I'm still standing firm on that kind of hill there. And I will say Wolves, I do think, will make it out of this. But once again, dropping points, they only have 1 point after 7 games. That is frightening, I would say. Because, like I've been saying, they usually do get out of this. And I will reiterate for the millionth time, I do think they will. But 1 point after 7 games is pretty unacceptable because you need to start picking up more. Like, even if they picked up like a couple of draws, say they were on like 3 points or something, 4 points, they'd be still in the mix of the relegation zone. But at least it's like some little bit of hope that like the fans can kind of cling on to. At the moment, they've got 1 point. That's 1 draw all season. They've lost every other game. Sitting on a goal difference of minus 12. They've only scored 9 and have conceded 21. That's just simply not good enough. And you would expect a little bit more from a team that does have talented players. I don't think it's a question of talent. I don't know if it's just like the start of the season curse for Wolves. I have no idea. But, I will now say that at this moment, if I was a Wolves fan, I think I'd be sweating just a little bit. I do still think they are okay. A team that I don't think will be okay is, of course, Southampton. Obviously, on the losing end of the 3-1 Arsenal win. So, it was always going to be tough for Southampton. I still don't really see them as a Cinderella staying up story. I really don't. It would be great if they did, because it'd be nice if a team didn't get immediately relegated after they were promoted. But I just don't see it happening. I just kind of think that they lack any real oomph to them. So they're kind of stuck firmly in that relegation zone, and I don't think it's going to be a spot that they're going to be leaving many times this season. Right above them, Crystal Palace. Once again, kind of like Wolves, I think I'd be sweating if I was a Crystal Palace fan right now. It's not been a good start to this season. And yes, they have some unbelievably talented players. Mark Guehi, Eze, all come to mind. But just simply, once again, 3 points after 7 games. It's better than 1, and it does at least give you a little bit of hope. But they've looked pretty lackluster. Like, Eze, I don't think has started the season greatly. Mark Guehi, I think, looks still pretty class, but obviously not really the heights that he was hitting in the Euros. Dean Henderson has had some big performances. Outside of that, I think you kind of flip a coin on a lot of their players. Trevor Chalobah, I think, was kind of, you were hoping to get something big from him on loan from Chelsea, of course, and I do rate Chalobah, but it just kind of hasn't really hit the ground running just yet. Obviously still a lot of time in this season, and they did make some good recruitments over the summer, but at the moment, yeah, I'd be a little bit nervous, just a tad, if I was a Palace fan. Right above them, Ipswich, Everton, Leicester, and Manchester United. Isn't that kind of funny? But Yeah, Ipswich, another team I think is in deep, deep trouble. Liam Delap is currently really their only guy that's looking like a star player. And if they do go down, I'm sure a team will pick him off. And if they don't go down, I would still probably say a team will pick him because he's shown that he is talented. He's a talented player and scored again this weekend. So it's not looking great for Ipswich at the moment outside of the one shining light because, I mean, you look and your other star player is a washed Calvin Phillips. So what more can be said? Everton picked up a point against Newcastle at least, so they're kind of starting to pick up some points more frequently, as we all are well aware. I think they were like 4 weeks in my top underperformers, like in a row. So, I mean, hey, at least they weren't mentioned this week in it. So, but just once again, just a slow start to the season for Everton. They're really struggling to find form, but they may have kind of started some semblance of form with results last weekend and now a draw this weekend. So we'll see. I just don't hold much hope for them. I think that their hope is that there are 3 teams worse than them, and that's how they stay up. And then looking at our European places, firmly in, obviously, those top 3, I still think will probably be the top 3 going forward. But then you got Chelsea in 4th, who I do think will finish the season in 4th. But then Aston Villa tied on points with Chelsea. It's just goal difference that separates them. Brighton, Newcastle, Fulham are all kind of breathing down the neck. So it's very interesting to see teams like Brighton, Newcastle, Fulham still in around the mix. I'm shocked Brighton are still up here because when they were in the top 4, I was telling them that they'd drop off, and they drop off relatively quickly. And then they did, and then they've kind of come back up in a short period of time. So it's good to see. Newcastle, obviously, I think now without such a congested fixture list like last season, I think that they can fully focus on trying to get back into Europe. And Fulham, I mean, it'd be great to see a team like Fulham get back into Europe after like a 10, 12 year absence. Yeah, it would have to be because they were in the Europa League, 2012, 2013? It would have been around that time. And then since then, they obviously haven't been in there. So it's just nice to see different teams in the mix, really. And then looking at, obviously, our title challengers, Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal, all firmly still in that title race. Just a point between all of them. Liverpool on 18, City and Arsenal on 17. So it'll heat up, I'm sure, as it kind of gets more intense with guys, inevitably going out injured, big results kind of for and against these teams. Like once Liverpool, City, or Arsenal maybe loses a couple, I think it'll get a little bit more intense. At the moment, it's kind of just like, hey, they're all still top 3. But I think that it will kind of get more intense as we've seen multiple times throughout the last few seasons. So at the moment, who's my money on? I don't know, honestly. I would still say probably City. But with Rodri going out, Liverpool looking just like a team that, even if they're not playing well, can pull out a result. And Arsenal, going on their 3rd season now as trying to be the title contenders. I think it's at least an interesting narrative. So we'll kind of see how it all pans out. And with all this being said, thank you for listening. That does bring to a close this episode of the Maple Footy Podcast. I do appreciate you for listening, sticking around the entire time if you did. And once again, I apologize for any sickness that you may have heard, whether it's in my voice or maybe some sniffles here and there. I tried to really kind of pause, cough off mic, So hopefully nothing too bad, hopefully. But once again, just a reminder, next week, no episode on Tuesday, potentially no episode at all. I will try, but like I said, I'm doing other things next week. Do remember to watch Canada Panama October 15th. It's just a friendly, but hey, support our boys. We have a lot of young faces in that squad, so it'll be very nice to see guys like them integrate into the first team and see what they can do at the international level. I think it's a phenomenal chance for a lot of them. So yeah, just really hope that they get that chance coming out of this window. And I believe There's a window in November. I don't think we've had any proper dates or matches announced. I could be wrong. Maybe I've missed them. But I do believe that there is one in November. So definitely keep an eye out for that. I'll post about it on my socials if there isn't a formal announcement. Now I'm like tripping. I'm 99% sure there is. After this podcast wraps, I will definitely be looking at it. But yes, please do watch that game. I will definitely be watching it. If I'm covering it, I will keep you updated on my socials. Follow me, all that jazz, at official Sam Little everywhere, except for X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, where I'm at @off_Sam Little. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for putting up with just cold riddled me. And until next time, everyone, cheers.
And that was your Maple Footy podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Check my socials for any and all future updates at official Sam Little on Instagram, where I am most active. And until next time, live, laugh, little.